We're now going to listen to pre-recorded videos sent by 3 authors who are unfortunately not able to be with us, but who are undoubtedly with us in spirit, and most likely viewing the parallel YouTube event. They are Professor George Watt, one of the 2 Proverse Prize winners 2020, Penelope Pelham West, one of 3 winners of publication prizes in 2020, and Marta Markoska, whose work came to Proverse as a publication proposal and not as an entry for the Proverse Prize. My introduction to each of these 3 books has also been pre-recorded, so we'll now continue on video without interruption. George Watt, The Finley Confession. The author, A.J. McKinnon, describes George Watt's novel as a coming-of-age story of great power and intensity.
Hello, fellow writers and fellow readers. It's been a tough 2 COVID years for people around the globe. Our economies have suffered in many ways, but among the worst affected sectors are the arts. And that said, Proverse needs to be complimented on their efforts to keep writing and publication alive and well. So, as I accept the Proverse Prize for The Finley Confession, I especially want to emphasise my gratitude to the publishing house for ensuring the work goes on despite a score of limitations and challenges. Without giving too much away, I, like most writers of fiction, am intrigued by the complex interplay of location, time, and people. By way of an introduction to the Finley Confession, I'll expand a little on all 3. First, the location. The novel is set in the stunningly beautiful snowy mountains, affectionately known as the Snowies, or sometimes as the High Country. 6 hours drive inland from Sydney, they are part of the Great Dividing Range. Below the tree line, eucalypt and pine forests flourish. Above it, bold, dramatic granite tors and peaks redefine the intense blue of the Antipodean sky. For uncountable millennia, indigenous peoples arrived at the lower reaches of the mountains to feast on the annual arrival of an eclipse of boggon moths. In the 19th century, stockmen drove their herds up for summer grazing and helped to drive the First Nations people away. Then, time. The novel is set in the late 50s and early 60s, when the region was being transformed by the gargantuan engineering marvel, the Snowy Mountain Scheme. Sleepy rural backwaters and modest tiny towns became hives of activity as 16 dams, several new lakes, 9 hydroelectric power stations, and over 200 kilometres of aqueducts and tunnels were constructed. 100,000 immigrant workers arrived on the scheme, and the previously Anglo-Celtic monoculture found itself overnight very much multicultural. Central to the novel is the flooding of an old town by the scheme, the oncoming waters burying secrets on which the novel's plot relies. You couldn't wish for a more apt metaphor for the human subconscious. Buried secrets need and want to remain hidden, yet they insistently challenge themselves by what I call the universal Raskolnikovian thirst for confession. Third, the people. Being among the few teenagers in the town, 4 disparate young men find themselves thrown together, caught between the sleepy post-war community and the dramatic changes taking place. Initially, the 4 seem to represent 2 common Australian myths: mateship and the classless society. Ralph is the son of very wealthy pastoralists, the closest we can come to an aristocracy in Australia. His boarding school friend, the eccentric and creative Tim, is the son of Canberra academics. When they are in the Snows, they befriend 2 young men from the opposite end of the socio-economic scale. Noah, the son of the local impoverished garage owner, and the very enigmatic Jacka, an Aborigine who has just come back to the town to inhabit his recently deceased grandmother's shabby small holding. Poised on the edge of manhood, the 4 form complex relationships with each other, aspects of which they can neither understand nor articulate. Australian men simply don't have the language through which to articulate highly individual aspects of self-development and interpersonal relationships. This is one of the many reasons why men in Australia never really grow up. But if the 4 have trouble working themselves out and working out each other, problems are multiplied tenfold with the arrival of singer Cynthia Ross. Though decent and humble, and as far from a femme fatale as you can get, Cynthia unwittingly becomes the catalyst for a set of very dramatic changes. In producing this novel, which is my first, I have been fascinated by the way working in a narrative form differs from other kind of writing that I have done and published, such as working with a thesis or an essay or a poem. The end point of an essay has already been decided, and it's something one meticulously and logically works towards. The end point of a poem is as much dictated by the form at hand as the subject matter. But working with narrative, I have discovered that character shapes action, which in turn gives the novel its momentum and shapes its various conclusions. More than any other writing form, characters seem to take on a life of their own, completely independent of the author's plans and forecasts and so-called intentions. Character seems to decide what happens next. Writerly intention is trumped by the nature of the characters and the situations in which they find themselves. A novel, then, seems to take on a direction and personality all of its own, and at times the writer feels beside the point. Finally, why do I think you would find the Finley Confession worth reading? Well, if you like a set of mysteries, for most people in the world an exotic location, unique characters, some romance, contemporary themes, some humour and some lyricism, all of which I think this novel contains, then it might well be for you. I would be delighted to hear frank responses from any reader, both positive and constructively critical. Both will be more than welcome. In closing, finally, I would like to give a special thanks to the judges and founders for this award and prize.
Penelope Pelham West has researched, transcribed and prepared an edition of her great-grandfather's letters, London Letters Home, 1861 to 1865, of an American apprentice preparing for the Far East tea trade. John Bedell, Professor of Economics, DePaul University, Chicago, Illinois, finds that the letters, placed in the editorial context of Penny's work, provide unrivaled insight into the training of young professionals of this era, and constantly remind us that their success hinged upon courage, flexibility, and resilience in the face of rapidly changing commercial fortunes.
Good evening from Maine in the U.S. My name is Penelope West. My book, London Letters Home, includes the letters that my great-grandfather, Gustavus Farley Jr., wrote his family between 1861 and 1865 from London, where he was apprenticing as a tea taster in preparation to going to Hong Kong and joining his cousins at Augustine Herd, a well-established merchant house. I want to thank Dr. Gillian Bickley and her husband, Dr. Werner Bickley, for founding the prize. I'm deeply indebted to the Proverse editing team for shepherding my work. They were very patient with me as they narrowed the scope and the structure for this book. I must also thank Proverse for seeing the value of sharing these primary documents. Indeed, these letters may be unique, as I failed to find anyone writing about tea tasting apprenticeships in London before heading out to China. When Gus left his home in Massachusetts, the American merchant adventurers who swarmed into the China trade at the end of the American Revolution were being replaced by a second and a third generation of Western businessmen. As Gus put it, tea tasting is one of those businesses which takes time, experience, and it is the height of folly for a man to go to China with superficial knowledge. His letters are open-ended. He didn't know how things would work out. Would the Civil War destroy his country? Would he get to see his family before going to China? Would he be the shining light he desired to be for his father, who had had so many business reverses, for his 4 younger sisters, or for his dear Swedish mother? Would tea tasting agree with him? Would he succeed in the tea business and get on with his cousins? Would he find friends and mentors in London? Surely the riches and the opportunity of exotic China must have always been in the back of his mind, encouraging him forward. It was with great expectations under his arm that my grandfather, really just a 17-year-old boy, set off across the Atlantic for an apprenticeship as a tea taster in Charles Dickens's London. He had a rocky start, almost dying in a boat accident before even setting foot in England. Then the man who was his mentor was away in Russia on secret business. He had to wear a beastly, uncomfortable top hat, which was the standard attire for apprentices, and to top it all off, there was no position waiting for him. Gus was young and naive and alone in the big smoke. He encountered bullies in the lodging place, hoi polloi crowding across London Bridge, clerks and fellow apprentices in the city, kind landladies, welcoming families, demeaning employers at Bullivant and Wilson, and decent ones at Ripley's on Mincing Lane. He roamed the streets of London, entered the commercial auction house, the post office, the customs house, and the docks. He rode to work on the Metropolitan subway line just after it had been completed. He ventured out into the countryside, visited Scotland in June and Paris for Christmas, and attended a Scottish church where he met young ladies from Nova Scotia. Gus made a best friend. At Ripley's there are 2 other fellows whom I like very much. They're preparing to go to China. There is one about my age who is situated about the same as I am. He's from Glasgow, Scotland. He described his work. I suppose you'd be pleased to know what my duties are at the tea broker office. One of the principal duties is sampling. That is, I am sent to different warehouses on the docks where the tea is stored to get samples of the different teas which come from China direct from the ships, or those teas which are to be sold at public auction. You would laugh to see me traveling through the streets with a great blue sack on my back with about 50 pounds of tea in it. When it finally came time for Gus to head to China, he sailed on the clipper ship the Waterloo for 123 days straight before disembarking in Hong Kong, the Promised Land.
Marta Markoska's Black Holes Within Us is published as part of the regular Proverse publishing program. and did not come to us as an entry for the Proverse Prize. Biljana Perchinkova describes Marta's book as the result of a deeply mature search by an individual who seeks nothing more than the purest essence of its being.
Tea cookies, tearful cookies. When in my cup of tea I dip an O-shaped cookie, I think of you, although your name starts with a different letter. And when I suck in the juicy plumped cookie, I think of you saying, don't buy these tea cookies, because when I drink tea, you drink coffee. Are we supposed to be tearful, since we both cannot enjoy the taste of these tea cookies? And I thought of saying, although I didn't, remember not the taste of the cookie, but of the time spent passionately enjoying it. At least you should conserve these precious moments, for I'm not Proust, and even he didn't solve the issue of time lost. Curating life, rating life. When I was only 15, I longed for you to hold me for hours. Now you hold me for hours, and I long to be 15 again. Entropy of love. I once made chaos in your system, not to prove to you the existence of entropy, generated whenever our two bodies were in a ratio one to another, since I said nothing new. Thermodynamics has been invented long time ago, and it will remind us for a long time of the energy lost through interaction. I once created chaos in your perfect order, not for the purpose of violating your personal values, but to comfort you with the fact that such rules of the game are followed in the cosmos, and we are like two black holes, fused together, sucking energy from one another, harder than it was naturally built into the system, and now drain out, hoping to become stars again. I now assure you that two formations, two bodies, two souls create much greater entropy than any individual body for itself. Quantum theory of love. We are just like stars that collapsed in their own gravity and now weightless, back to the zero state. We count time backwards, so we can claim that it all started with us, and with us it shall end. sweet universe. If we were dreamers on some other planet and we eat cookies made of nebula, would we then, as we do now, think about living, or would have been just as sweet an experience as my grandmother's vanilla half moon cookies? If we were thinkers on some other planet and we ate breadsticks that finish the straight line of our lives, would we then, as we do now, think that parallel lines touch somewhere in the infinity? Or would have that been too salty of an ocean for people who prefer sweet pleasures?
We're going to have cookies.
We're going to have cookies in a moment. We are. Well done.
Salty.
Well noticed. Well, thank you very much to all the writers and poets who have introduced their work to us. Do you have any questions? Would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment?
I'd like to make a comment, and I hope you'll forgive me and you won't be embarrassed, but I think we all should give a round of applause to Bernard and Gillian for doing this.
Very kind, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. What would anybody like to make any other comment? Any question? Okay. So that's the end of the question and answer session. So that concludes the formal part of the programme. We're really pleased you've joined us. We hope you found it informative, interesting, and enjoyable. The holiday season is approaching. We have to buy presents for people. What better present to purchase than a book? Whether for ourselves or for our family or friends. The writers are here. Please get a copy of their book, ask them to sign for you. That makes it really special. You can't do that if you order online or go to a bookshop. Buy their book, ask them to sign it. We've also got some of the Mingled Voices anthologies on the book table. And some of the poets are here, and I'm sure they too would love to sign next to their poem in the book. So those are on the book table. However, if you can't bring yourself to do it tonight, you can still do it online. You can go to the Chinese University of Hong Kong Press website, and you can also purchase copies from Amazon. But I think it's really nice to encourage local publishers and local distributors to support them. Now, in about a month's time, please visit our YouTube channel when I think Felix will have finished editing the video of this evening, and then we can enjoy it all over again with extra touches that Felix will put in. I'd like to give particular thanks to the Helena May and the Helena May staff. They're always willing and patient and efficient. I also thank Felix, of course, for his sterling technical work, and Miss Polly Ho for helping as well. There are two people who are not here who deserve many thanks. The printer, Mr. Jackson A., who's really kind and really patient and helpful and supportive. And also Mr. Dickie Wu, our cover designer. Dickie Wu is on, but both of them are on Facebook, and I'm their Facebook friend as well as working with them. And Dickie posts photographs about restaurants, for example. So thank you all very much for your attention and support and for joining us this evening. Please now enjoy the cookies and chocolates, and please order. The bar service is available again if you'd like to order again. So this is the end of the reception, but not the end of the evening. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you so much.